back to another exciting episode here at IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Wes Bryan, and in today's episode, we're continuing through our series within VMware. That's right, we're coming back at you with more of that VMware Certified Professional version 6. Actually coming at you with a part 2 in auto deploy. Joining me in the studios again is none other than Mr. Don Pezet. Don, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Wes, and yeah, in typical fashion, I thought I could get through auto deploy in one episode. I even said, hey, we're going to configure it in 30 minutes, and then I rambled on a little too much, so it didn't happen. But in the last episode, if you didn't watch it, we set up the basic infrastructure to support auto deploy. We set up a TFTP server, we set up a DHCP server, so we got those things kind of configured and ready to support auto deploy. Our next step is to actually create the ESXi image to get installed, and so without further ado, we'll go ahead and just dive right in and start to get that set up. So the last thing we talked about in part 1 was getting the Power CLI set up, getting that command line interface in place. And I've got my Power CLI launched. I'm on my vCenter server, but with Power CLI, you could actually be on your own workstation and connect. So the thing with this is you actually build connections to various places. So you can connect to your VI servers or wherever. It depends on how you want to go about it. So for example, if I want to get connected to my vCenter server, since I'm already on it, I could actually get away with skipping this step. But let's say you're on your workstation. The first command you'd want to issue is connect-vi server, and then the name of your VI server, right? So in my case, it's win-server01, but yours probably has a name that's a little bit better than that. So I'm going to punch that in to get connected. And so basically, it's going to generate an authentication token and throw it at that server, and then prompt me to log in. So I'm going to log in with administrator at vsphere.local. You, again, might have configured single sign-on, so you'll have different accounts, but that's the one that I've got. And so I'm going to authenticate, and now I'm connected to the vCenter server. Now, technically, I already was. I could have skipped that and just gone through and rambled through the commands, but this is what I would do if I was on my workstation, right? So I'm connected to vCenter now. And now when I start issuing commands, it's tying it to vCenter. So the first thing I need to do is I need to get a base image of ESXi. And I mentioned in the last episode that I could go to my VMware download page, and wherever you find the ESXi ISO image, the VM-Visor ISO image, usually right beneath it is a link for what's called the offline bundle. And the offline bundle is the base image that we need for doing a deployment like this. So you can go and download it and bring it in here and have it offline. Personally, I like to get it live from VMware. That way I can get the latest version and it's pulled right from them and I don't have to worry about storing it on my end. And so it's just kind of a little cleaner in my opinion. So I'm going to set myself up to pull right from VMware, and we can do that. Because VMware, as part of their VM update service, they have update servers that have all the base images right there. And we can reach out and pull the images right from them. So I'm going to start by adding an ESX software depot. Okay, an ESX software depot, that's where our images are going to be stored. And if I have it downloaded, if I downloaded the offline bundle, I would just say depot URL and point it to wherever my image is. So C:// blah, 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 right? And point it to, or DEF, whatever drive it is, and point it to that file, right? But if I want to pull it from online, then all I have to do is come in here and say the depot URL is https://hostupdate.vmware.com, right? So I'm pointing to VMware's website /software/VUM, which is the VMware Update Manager, /production. I don't want beta or test or early release, right? I want production deployment. And then I'm going to wrap here in a second. Not actual wrapping, but word wrapping. So main is what I'm trying to type here. So main. And then after main, we need vmw-depot-index.xml. All right? We're pointing to an XML file that has a list of all the images that are hosted in the VMware Update Server. And that's because we don't necessarily want to get the latest, we probably do, but we might want to get older versions too. If I have a consistent deployment plan that relies on an older version, maybe I still have ESXi 5.5 deployed heavily and I haven't gone to 6 yet. I don't want to get the 6 base images, I still need 5.5. So this XML file will let me see all of the images. And there's a lot more than just base images up there. There's a lot of drivers, hardware drivers that I can pull down too, because I might want to build a custom image that has certain drivers that are built into it. So there we go. So now I'm connected. And if you're not sure if somebody's already set this up, you can always run get-image ESX Software Depot, and that'll give you a list of the depots, and you can see if you're configured for one or not. I'm now configured for the online one. Okay. The next thing I need to do is I need to figure out which base image I'm going to use. And there's a couple of commands that we can run here. So I mentioned like all the software packages that are out there, all the drivers. Well, you can run get-esx software package. There we go. And when you run that, it's going to query the server and return a list of all the software that's available from the system. And you'll see things like ESX base software packages, right? This one's for 5.0. And if I keep looking, I'll see here's ESX base again for 5.0, ESX base again for 5.1, and if I sift through here long enough, I'll find the ESX base for 6 and so on. I'll see the VMware tools, ATA, PATA drivers, we've got CCISS drivers, you'll find all sorts of crazy stuff in here. We'll find SAN and iSCSI drivers, network card drivers. All these are different software packages that we can pull in and add to our base package, to our base image. So we can go, we can go well beyond it if we can master typing on the keyboard. So that was get ESX software package. But where I really want to start is get ESX image profile. All right, now, what is an image profile? An image profile is a list of software packages that I combine to create the image I want to roll out. So I never want to roll out just ESX base by itself because it doesn't have any hardware drivers. So if I throw that out, it's not going to see my network adapter, it's not going to see my hard drives, it's going to be terrible, right? So I want ESX base combined with several other drivers. Well, the image profiles are the collections that identify that. And if I go to HP, they'll have an image profile for each of their different hardware servers. So if I've got a ProLiant 360, I can make sure that I just get the drivers that relate to that hardware and not drivers for all the other hardware that's out there because I don't have that hardware. What do I need that for, right? Well, here's where things get a little tricky. You saw how many software packages there were. So how many combinations of software packages do you think that can make? Tons. In the old days, I could run get-esx image profile, and I would get a list of the profiles from VMware, and there weren't that many. And over time, they grew and they grew and they grew. Well, they finally grew so large that if I were to run this command right now, it'll lock up the PowerShell. And I'll have to close the PowerShell and open again, start all over again. So you never want to run this command by itself anymore. It's just more than what the PowerShell can handle. So we always want to filter it, okay? So I'm going to filter it and look for image profiles with a name. And I'm going to look for any one that starts with ESXi-6.star. Okay, I'm looking for any ESXi6 image profiles. This will filter out the 5.5s, the 5.1s, 5.0s, 4.1s, and so on. This will just give me the 6s. It'll still be a lot. There's still going to be a lot of them, but it's not going to overwhelm my PowerShell. So it's going to reach out and get those. And now I can look, and what you'll see is there's a number of these profiles built up. And you'll see some of them are no tools, or they do have the tools. They're talking about the vCenter agent and those things, whether or not they've got it installed. These are all variations. And they're released on a, I think it's like every 4 weeks or something, they put out a new release. I know they're all showing last modified April 29th, but they do actually update them fairly frequently. And so you can come through and pick, and you can see the dates. Like, see how it says this one was modified April 29th, but if I look over here, this one's actually dated July 4th, 2015. So this file name, what it's made up of is you have the year, followed by the month, followed by the day, and then what image that is for that day. So this was the first image generated this day, and it's a rare day. They generate more than one image, but if they ever did, you might have an O2. If there was a bug, they immediately spotted. So this one was made back in 2015. I see right here I've got 2016, March 1st, right? And so go through and find the most recent one. Here I've got 2016, May 4th. That's not too long ago, right? We can probably find a June one. There's probably a June one in here somewhere. But basically you're going to find the base image that you want to use that to serve as your image profile. It's always better to just copy one of VMware's profiles because it's already got all the drivers and stuff in it, and then you can just modify that profile as needed. All right, so I'm going to copy one of theirs, and the way we do that is with new-esx image profile -clone profile. I'm going to clone one of their profiles, and I need to tell it the profile that I want to clone, and I'm going to clone ESXi-6.0.0-2016-0302-001-standard. That's the one that I want to clone from them. Okay, so I'm going to clone that image, and when I clone it on my system, I'm going to give it a different name. So I'm going to call it, I'll say -name, and then I'm going to give it a name of lab-ESX, right? That's going to be a lot easier for me to type, just calling it lab-ESX. So I'm going to put that in there. All right. Now I could clone any of these that I wanted, so I can go and find the one that's relevant to me and use that one to clone. But in this case, I'm going to pick this one. Oh shoot, I left out vendor. I should have done -vendor and provided a name. We don't want the vendor to be VMware because we want to identify the stuff that we created. A lot of people just put custom in here, but I'll put IT Pro TV as the vendor. And that way, whenever I query the images, when I queried the images a minute ago, I filtered by version number. But now I can filter by vendor and say, just show me the images that are IT Pro TV. All right? And I know I'm connected to VMware Online. I didn't just publish this to VMware Online. Like, you guys won't be able to see this. It's published here in my vCenter server. But now it's created. I've got that lab-ESX. Now, I did need the full name of that image up here, and you'll notice it's truncated on my screen, these ... dots. So if you ever need to see the full name on these things, when you run the get ESX image profile, if you pipe that into the format-list command, which can actually be abbreviated to just like FL if you want, but format-list, it'll display it in a list format, that's the name, but it makes it where you can read the whole name, right? And so now I can find ESXi, this one's no tools or standard or whatever, and it'll help you kind of find a little more information about those and see the full name. All right. So at this point, I've got an image profile. Now, I'm actually fine with the base profile that I just got from VMware, so I don't need to modify it. But if I wanted to modify it, if I wanted to add drivers in or take drivers out, you've got two commands you can use for that, which are add-ESX software package. All right, so that one we can add the software packages in and get those in place, or you can do remove-ESX software package. And so we can use those commands and point them at the image profile to modify them and kind of customize them to our needs. If you do a get-help for either of those commands and do a examples, there we go. I don't need to update. Let's just say no to that. There we go. Then you'll get a couple of examples of how that works. So see here how they're adding a software package for an image profile, and they're pointing it to my custom profile. Mine was called lab-ESX. And then they're telling it the software package to add, and they're adding some kind of network adapter. So net-BNX2 1.6.7-0.1 OEM1, right? So they're adding that driver in, or you can take drivers out. You can do all sorts of stuff right from there. So easy enough to modify those images once they're created. But at this point, I've got an image now, and that image is called lab-ESX. So I'm good to go. We set up the TFTP server in the last episode. We set up DHCP. Now I've got an image. We're ready to rock, right? Well, not quite. We've got an image, but we haven't really told the system to use it, right? And we haven't really even downloaded it, truly. So, so we've got it, but it's not quite ready for use. So to get it ready for use, I've got two choices. One, I can download it to vCenter and get ready to serve it over the network. Or two, I could create an ISO image on that. I could actually make my own bootable CD. So after I customize it, add drivers, take drivers out, whatever it is that I'm going to do to customize it, I can now build my own ISO. And now I've got an ISO I can deploy that's ready to update, ready to rock, right? Because there have been numerous updates to ESX since it came out. And if I install on the VMvisor disk that they distribute, I'm going to have to do updates right away. Now I can build my own that's got the updates already in it, right? And to do that, we have an export command. So you can say export-ESX image profile, and you give it the image profile name, which mine was called lab-ESX, right? And then you can say dash export to ISO, and then you can give it a file path to get to that, right? So C:/ whatever, right? So you can point it to that, and that'll export an ISO, and now you can burn that to disk and take it wherever and have it going there. That's certainly an option if you want to go the physical media route.
And once that commandlet was run on, could you turn around and put that in the NFS ISO or the ISO store, the data store that you showed us creating in an earlier episode?
You could, but it really wouldn't help you at that point. Like when you're trying to install ESX on a server, it can't access data stores at that point. It doesn't have those drivers. So you could put it there for safekeeping, but that's all it would be. You wouldn't be able to use it from there. So you'd really need to take it and burn it to a disk, or use like UNetbootin to make a USB key or something like that, and then you'd actually be able to use it.
In the first part of this episode, you said that there are some basics that you need to know about auto deploy. Now, with the Power CLI commandlets that you're showing, you do believe that's going to be testable material, and should one of our viewers that's going to approach this certification be aware of those commandlets?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. You might not need to memorize the full syntax, but expect to see some of these commands on the exam, so at least be able to recognize what's right and what's wrong. So if you have multiple choice answers and each one has a different PowerShell command, you want to be familiar with them. And I'm showing you guys the ones that might show up on the exam. There's thousands of commands. I'm not showing you all of those because they're not on the exam. So these are the ones that you'll need to remember. And we're almost done too. We only have a little bit more to do. I'm not going to export to an ISO. I don't need that. I've got my image profile created. I want to serve it up online. So to do that, the next thing I need to do is to create a deployment rule. And the deployment rule is just going to say, if somebody boots up and connects to me via the network, connects via auto deploy, here's the image that I want to give them. And so the command to do that is to say new deploy rule dash name, and we'll give it a name. Okay, so I'm going to call this one the IT Pro TV lab. Right, so this is going to be everything I'm doing here in my lab. And then dash item, what I'm going to be handing out. I'm going to be handing out the lab-ESX image profile. That's the image profile that I created. So anybody that is in my lab, I want to give them this profile. Okay. Now, if I stop right here, anybody who boots up and connects via auto deploy is going to get this image and it's going to roll it out. So let's say that somebody's on a laptop one day and they're screwing around and they boot it up and they press power and they decide, hey, what happens if we boot from network? And they boot from the network. Well, their laptop's going to get formatted and it's going to get ESX put on it. So we probably don't want to stop here. We probably want to go a little bit beyond that to say, don't just deploy it everywhere. Now, Wes, I know you brought up in the last episode that we could have solved this problem with DHCP, right?
Yeah, my thought was, if you're going to deploy this out to host, why don't you just create maybe a dedicated scope inside of your DHCP server?
And you certainly could. The problem with DHCP is it uses broadcast, though, right? So what you'd have to have are separate subnets. So if all your laptops and desktops run one subnet, and all your ESX boxes run another subnet, then I could stop right here and just have it blanket you, because only ESX boxes would boot up on that network and connect to that DHCP server, so only they'd get the setting, and I'd be okay with that, right? But if I have ESX boxes that are on the same network as my clients, now I get a little overlap. And so we can apply a filter to this rule to limit who it applies to. And there's a ton of different filters that you can do. You can filter by MAC address, you can filter by hardware ID, you can filter by all sorts of things. I usually filter by IP range. And that's because you can set up DHCP reservations for your host so you kind of know what IP they're going to get, and they're easy to change later on. So if we want to filter by IP, what we would do is we would just come in here and say dash pattern, and then under pattern, there's a number of different options. So I could say like MAC equals, and then put in a MAC address. I'm going to say IPv4 equals, and then 192.168.0.0. I'll just do the whole range. 0.0 all the way through 192.168.0.254. There. So I'm just going to say if you're in this particular subnet, in this range of IPs, then this rule is going to apply to you. Okay? And I don't remember if I put my quote marks on the other side. Let me see if I did. I did. Good. All right. So when I run that, that's going to create the deploy rule. And as soon as I create the deploy rule, my vCenter server is going to say, oh, shoot, now I've got people who need to receive this image, so let me go and download it, right? Now, when I created my image, I just cloned the ESX base profile, and that was it. So it should just download one thing, right? Well, no. The base image profile was made up of a number of software packages, right? These are all the software packages included on your CD, and so it's got to download all those software packages. And if you look, you'll see them coming through. We've got here's a Hewlett-Packard card of some sort. We've got a RAID controller driver being loaded. We've got, I don't even know what some of these things are. There's a network adapter driver right there, a Net E1000E, that's the Intel Pro 1000 adapters. So it is pulling those in. So each of these are different drivers that are having to be loaded into the system, and it's downloading them right to my vCenter server.
And now that you've got your rule created, right, we're ready to go. Host should boot up and they should find the server?
Pretty much. We do have one more step. So I got to wait for it to finish downloading, right? So that's kind of a given. But then technically I made the rule, but I haven't actually turned it on yet. So I've got to turn it on. I know it's kind of counterintuitive because I did the new -deploy rule. We created it, right? But it actually creates it in a disabled state. So I need to do a add deploy rule command. And I know new versus add. New creates a brand new one. Add turns it on. It adds it to the active list of deploy rules. So that's going to be the next thing I do as soon as this is done downloading. Now, when it's downloading, there's two packages that are going to be the largest. There's the ESX base. So when we get to that one, it's going to take it a moment. And then the other one is the ESX UI. So when you deploy ESX, it actually has the vSphere native client as part of the deployment. Remember, you could go to the web page of your ESXi host and download the native vSphere client. So those two are the ones that are going to take the longest to download. But I say the longest. All said and done, this is going to add up to about 350 megs. So it's not a huge amount of data. But VMware's servers are servicing a lot of people. And so you're not the only person accessing them. When you do it online like this, it can take a little while sometimes. That's an advantage of going offline. If you get the offline bundle, you download it as one big file, and it's got everything you need right in that one big file, and it downloads faster. But this one's moving pretty quick. There was that ESX base. It just downloaded. And with each of these, notice how it's doing three things. It's downloading it, it's extracting it, and then it's uploading it. Where's it uploading it to? Well, it's uploading it to vCenter. I'm downloading it to wherever I'm running the Power CLI. So this might be my laptop or a desktop somewhere, and then it's having to upload it to vCenter. Now, I'm actually on my vCenter server, but that doesn't make a difference here. It's still got to run that process, so it downloads it and uploads it. So it should almost be done. I haven't seen the ESX UI pass by yet, but that's another one that'll make up a pretty decent chunk of it. The tools actually add up to a pretty decent bit, because those are all the ISO images that have the VMware tools for each of the different distros that are out there. I might not have any Linux distros. I might not have any of those other operating systems. And so it's downloading images that I don't necessarily need. These are things that I could have removed if I customized the profile a bit. All right. So there we go. It is almost done.
And Don, on that note, would this be something that you could go and turn around and, let's say you wanted to save space for whatever reason, could you strip that stuff off after the fact, or would it be something that you need to make up your mind prior to downloading the ISO?
So we could certainly strip it out, but once you do, you need to recreate the deploy rule, right? So we would just remove the deploy rule that's there and put it back in, and then it would re-download and get it kind of pared down. And it is all about speed. Even though it's only 350 megs, you kind of see how long it's taking me to download. When I start deploying that to my machines, the less stuff in there, the faster it'll deploy. So if I get an emergency call that says, hey, this data center is getting overwhelmed, we need more resources, I might have servers pre-staged where I just go in there and hit the power button and fire them up, and I want them to get up as fast as I can. So the smaller the image, the better. But the more customized hardware you've got to support, the more drivers you got to load, it's just going to take longer. All right, then mine finally finished. All right, so now that it's done, here we go. Now I've got that deploy rule created. You can see my pattern list in place. We should be good to go as long as I turn the rule on. So I need to, what did I call my rule? IT Pro TV-lab. That's important. You got to remember what stuff's called. So I'm going to say add-deploy rule, and then I need to give it that name. And the name for mine was it's actually right there on the screen, if I would bother to look, right there on the screen. So I'm just going to type in that name, and I'm going to add it. Okay, so now it's added, and it's active. So now the best way for us to test this is to fire up another host, right? So I've got another host, ESX host 03, which is just a bare metal machine, right? So I don't have an OS installed on it. It's got I think a 40 gig hard drive in it. It's completely blank, so nothing on the hard drive, and it is set to boot from the network. Now, in your environment, you'll have to go to your hardware and figure out the best way to do that. A lot of them, you can just go into BIOS, and you can set network boot as up higher in the order, and then it'll boot from network. Or you might have to hit a key combination. It might be one of those where it's like press F12 to get a boot menu, or press F2, or whatever other crazy key combination you've got. I don't know. So read your vendor documentation, find out what it takes to boot your machine off the network. Then when you start to boot off the network, things should happen pretty fast. You should see a little message about booting from the network. You should see it get a DHCP address, and if everything's working right, it should then reach out to the TFTP server and kick off auto deploy. All right, so let's see if that's working for me. I'm going to fire my machine up, and here it goes. And sure enough, I see it's booting off of the network boot from Intel E1000. That's my adapter. It got an IP address from DHCP, so I see that address. And now it's kicking off a connection to the TFTP server. So it's reaching out to get a file. And I see that right here. There's that kpxe.vmw hardwired only. And then after that, you saw the bootloader. The bootloader kicked in. Then the bootloader talked to vCenter and said, hey, can you give me a copy of ESXi? And that's where the server said, yeah, let me look. I've got a deploy rule that says your IP is in this range, and that means you get the lab ESX image profile. So here it is. And now I'm getting the lab ESX image profile. Okay. By default, it's going to install it on my hard drive. So I didn't configure state or any of that other crazy stuff so it would run from RAM. It's going to install it here on my hard drive. And so that's what it's doing. It's loading that and getting it put on my system. Now, if I jump back over to my server, here's my TFTP server running in the background. And if I look at the logs from my TFTP server, I can see where it connected. And what you're going to see in the logs for TFTP is kind of interesting because it'll actually look like a bunch of failures. It's kind of funny. Well, if you find this stuff funny. So what you'll see is where it does like a test connection. It just tries to touch it to make sure the file exists. So see, I've got this call right here for that UNDI only.kpxe.vmw-hardwired. And it actually sent 82 blocks. Yeah. A lot of times, here we go. TFTP aborted, right? See this error? You'll see those because it's just testing to see if the file exists. And TFTP doesn't have a way to do that. So the way to test it is you try and download it and then you stop immediately. And if you fail on that first byte, then you know it didn't work and you don't have to wait for more. But if you continue to try and download, then you have these repeating failures and you have to wait on the server, causes a delay. So it's faster for them to abort than it is for them to actually try to do the download immediately. So that's what it does just to test and see if it works. And then if it does, then it actually goes and downloads it. And so that's what it downloaded from here. But as I look at the logs, notice that it's only that hardwired file. I don't see anything else. That's the only file we get from TFTP. After we've connected and hit the bootloader, now it's able to talk to vCenter directly and transfer the files through auto deploy. So it's not using the TFTP server anymore. That was just to kick things off. Now we're talking to vCenter and the deployment is happening. Now, I'll actually be able to see some of that. Well, we can sit here and wait for this. There's actually two stages. I don't know which stage we're in now because I wasn't paying attention. But it'll do one set of files where the yellow bar will go all the way across, and that's like getting the base OS in place. And then it kind of does like a soft boot in the background, and you'll see this bar go across a second time as it loads the rest of ESX. So there's two stages. In the first stage, we really don't see anything in vCenter. In the second stage, it actually shows up in vCenter, and we can see it. And I'm definitely in the second stage now because ESXi is booting. Now it's actually booting ESXi from the image that it just downloaded from the server. And even better, if I go back to vCenter and refresh my screen here, I'm not sure if it'll show up just yet. Yeah, we'll give it a minute. In just a minute, I'll see a new entry show up in here. And it'll be that host identified by its IP address. And so it'll show up here as an IP address. But the important part there is that not only does the server show up, it's already added to vCenter. If I had a default host profile attached, it could go ahead and attach to get configured and be ready to go without me touching a single thing. But I didn't spend a lot of time customizing it, so there's going to be some problems. Common problems that we'll see, the memory dump area. Because I didn't know what hard drives the machine would have, I didn't define a memory dump area, so it's going to tell me, it's going to complain and say memory dumps don't work. It's also going to complain to say there's no data stores. If I deployed it into a cluster, it would get data stores from there, but otherwise it just doesn't have any, so I'll get a warning for that. There'll be a few other little warnings like that, mostly that we can ignore, but it just means we need to customize it more. If I customize that image profile more, we can get it completely seamless, where it deploys with no errors, everything's ready to go, it's ready to dive into production. It's all about how much time you spend with it. And that's why if you're doing 5 deployments or 10 deployments, you probably just do them by hand. It's easier. But if you're doing 1,000 deployments, yeah, we got to spend a little more time customizing that image, but once you do, you'll get more stable images that are streamlined down to just what you need, that are fast, easy deployment, and you can knock out 1,000 servers in under an hour. I mean, you can really knock those out quick because you're just hitting a power button. Well, somebody's got to take the time to unbox them and put them in the rack, right? But that's not us. As long as we don't have to do that, it's fine. So, all right, looks like that box is fully booted now. So I'm going to go back over here and refresh my vCenter. And hopefully, there we go. Whew, I had me doubting for a moment there. I can see that extra host has appeared. And I didn't tell it that it was going to be called ESX Host 03, so it didn't know to change the name. That's why it's the IP. But it's got it added in. And if I go to my summary, I do have some warnings. And here you see core dump is complaining about that. No data stores. The default password for the root user has not been changed, right? Because I never told it a password. I should have done that in the configuration. And the system logs are stored in non-persistent storage. They're stored in RAM because it didn't know if it was going to have any hard drives, right? If you don't have any hard drives, you can't store it in persistent storage, so it's warning me about that. So those are a couple of warnings we get. We could certainly configure around that. But the key thing is if I have a host profile, I can come in and attach a host profile to this guy, right? And if I attach a host profile, now it can be fully configured, and we're done. This machine's ready to go. You can rapidly deploy machines very quickly, and that's the awesome part about auto deploy. It's a really neat system, and it does work really well.
Tell you what, it saves the salaried employees. Not too good for the hourly employees. You just knock some of their paycheck down. But Don, it does look like we're coming to the end of another great episode here. But before we do, when it comes to the content, do you have any additional words?
For the exam, make sure you familiarize yourself with the Power CLI commands. I showed you the important ones. There's not that many of them. Just make sure you understand the format and what data is being provided. In real life land, don't hesitate to use the online repository. Almost every website out there will tell you to use an offline repository just because it's easier. But you can get the latest files right from VMware very easily. I prefer to go that route. It is a little bit harder, but I think it's a better solution. Weigh what works for you. And then the other thing is, just because auto deploy is neat and works really well doesn't mean you have to use it. Understand that sometimes it's okay to do things manually. I can install an ESX server by hand pretty quickly without having to set up all this infrastructure. So don't feel like you have to use the technology just because it's there.
Well, Don, as always, we appreciate having you here in the studios with us, and we appreciate you, the viewers, for watching. Signing out for IT Pro TV, I've been your host, Wes Bryan.
And I'm Don Pizzette.
And we'll see you next time.